Okay. Ow. Hit my elbow. Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about our magical electional opportunities that we're going to have between our Virgo New Moon on September 2nd or 3rd until our Libra Solar Eclipse, or our Libra New Moon on October 2nd. Fun fact, in writing, I often get August and October mixed up because when you write them, the eighth month is August, right? But because it's October and 8th, I often will think October is the 8th month, which means August must be the 10th month. So, fun trivia. Write that down for trivia night. So this month, there's not a whole lot going on, and that's always a little unfortunate. I know that I really enjoy those months where there's a really nice configurations to take advantage of in making astrological talismans. Unfortunately, this month is not one of those. We still have a lot of problems that we're kind of dealing with. The biggest issue is Saturn's retrograde and Jupiter is square Saturn. So we kind of have we have some planets that are on hiatus for a while, we'll say, and that kind of became a pretty constant obstacle in finding good election times. But we do have a few useful talismans coming up. We have a bit of a cluster coming up in mid-September that we're going to talk about, and then I wanted to take a minute to talk about an election that you'll probably see in the near future. So the first election we're going to talk about is actually going to be for Australia. So this is going to be an Australian exclusive, only they're going to be able to get it. And it's going to take place on September 7th at around 4 in the morning. And this is going to be an opportunity for a 16th Lunar Mansion talisman. So the 16th Lunar Mansion is one that is primarily associated with like success in business. So there's like a financial element to it. And you can kind of use it generally for financial success if you want. I'm always a little bit careful when it comes to just sort of like financial talismans, because as you sort of familiarize yourself with them and their imagery and kind of how the text describes them, you see that they kind of have their own methods of operating. And so a financial talisman that is not focused in making money in a way that you make money, it becomes more difficult to utilize unless you're willing to like do that thing. So I say all that to say, even though the 16th Lunar Mansion has associations with like general financial success and like the income improvement, its imagery is a little bit more focused on buying and selling. So there's more of like a retail trade there involved. So if you aren't working in retail, if you're not working in a job environment where you have to sell things, where you work on commission, yada yada, then it's a little bit harder for this talisman to help you out. Another way that the 16th Lunar Mansion is helpful when it comes to finances is through like financial negotiation. So this can be really helpful for people who are trying to find investors or, negotiate loans or anything like that. The 16th Lunar Mansion can be helpful for. It's got this very like give and take bartering kind of negotiating imagery and power to it that will be more responsive to situations that reflect that or that embody that in some real way. So just kind of be mindful of that. That's not to say that you can't use the 16th Lunar Mansion for just like general financial improvement. It still has that kind of financial energy, but it will be harder to kind of like get that to work more specifically in that way. So taking a look at our election, that's going to be on September 7th at around 4 in the morning. So we're going to either wake up really early or we're going to wait to go to bed. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, Australia. And here we're going to have the moon in the 16th mansion here in the 3rd house. And that's going to become kind of a common theme in our elections. A lot of them are 3rd house focused, which isn't necessarily an issue, but it's a little bit further down the priority list, just kind of how we have to do things. So we've got the moon here in the 16th Lunar Mansion, and at this time she's applying a pretty close sextile to Mercury here in Leo. And I really like Mercury connections in a lot of the financial talismans. This is where we get kind of like basic ideas of finance, like commerce and mercantilism. So we see this kind of focus on Mercury and making money through through the economy, essentially, like through working, through earning it, through business, through trade, which is a little bit different than how we might see like Jupiter wealth, which is a bit more passive, we'll say, a bit more passive and supportive, whereas Mercury money is more about like, I don't want to say cooking the books, but knowing how to work the system and kind of working within that system. So this connection with Mercury, the 16th mansion, very helpful, very like fits the themes very well for what it is that we're trying to do here. The ruler of the first house is going to be the moon because we have the Cancer rising. The moon, of course, down here in Libra, she's not afflicted by Mars. I guess she's kind of distantly applying a trine. We don't really care about that. She's not afflicted by Saturn. The ascendant degree itself is not afflicted by Mars or Saturn. So we just have like a pretty nice looking 16th lunar mansion. It might also be worth mentioning that Mercury rules the second house, which is a house of money, and is in the first house, and so that's kind of fun, kind of a fun little thing. Make it look a little bit more like a house-based talisman, I guess. But yeah, so here you go, 16th lunar mansion. Congratulations, Australia. Dinner's on you. Our next electional opportunity is one that's going to be universal, so just about everybody will be able to use this one, and it's going to be an election for the 23rd lunar mansion. And the 23rd lunar mansion is a bit more of a kind of like a weird one, I guess. It is a lunar mansion that is associated with healing. It's got healing potential to it, but it also has kind of difficult or negative imagery associated with it. It's got this imagery that's associated with like conflict, and the mansion in the Arabic tradition that's associated with is called like the luck of the slaughterer. So it has this association with like devouring, with sacrifice, and it kind of sits in a middle space, kind of this gray area between lunar mansions that function better in the waxing moon phase and those that function better in the waning moon phase. As a talisman that is more health focused, I always prefer them to be made during the waxing moon phase, because I think it's more important to increase health than it is to like diminish disease. Though I know that is one method that many people adhere to and will utilize. I do it sometimes, but not super often. And then we have sort of the imagery, which is more about decline, more about devouring, more about taking in and reducing something, which would fit more the waning moon phase. So I don't pick a side, and I'm like, both sounds good. We'll do both. And so that's what we did here. We have this more health-based talisman that is in the waxing half of the zodiac right now. And I guess the big kind of thing is about it, why I even talked about it, is that health is not the only thing that that this lunar mansion can do. It is a mansion that's very much about like sacrifice and breaking and severing. So that's kind of like that devouring imagery, I guess. The idea that like you could use this in a waning moon phase to diminish something that was harming you, right? Like a bad habit or bad dietary, like whatever, like you could use it that way more in the waning moon phase. In the waxing moon phase, it's much more like health specifically oriented, where I'm not sure you would get some of those like severance powers from it as easily. So that's why I bring that up, is just because the moon phase, especially for lunar mansions, can really alter what it is that they can accomplish. And so wanted to be kind of mindful of that while looking for your own elections. Try to fit them within their proper moon phase. So looking at our election here, this for North America, this is going to be on September 13th at around 11:15 a.m. And at this point, we've got the moon here in the third house in the 23rd mansion. And this is what I said, like we're going to see some third house stuff going on. And right now she's applying a really nice trine to the sun here on the 11th house cusp in Virgo. And I love sun moon connections. I love sun connections and talismans. I like the sun. Weird. And especially when we're talking about something that's about health, the sun represents, vitality, represents that health, represents the constitution. And so I like having these very health affirming connections in talismans that are about affirming health or recovering health. And at this point, the moon's not afflicted by Saturn or Mars. The ascendant is here at 12 degrees Scorpio, so we've got the Mars in Cancer here as the ruler of the first house. Mars isn't afflicted by Saturn. It's not combust the sun. We don't have anything going wrong with it. Mars isn't retrograde. Being in fall is never super awesome, but we don't focus so much on that in like lunar mansion talismans. That's something that we're much more interested in like decan or planetary talismans. But one thing you could do with this if you wanted, so you can use this chart and this will be fine. One thing you can do if you want to is you could push this time back in order to get. So you can push this time not back, forward. Sorry, you can move time forward a bit. To tighten up the aspect between, like you can get a sextile between the sun and the ascendant, and that seems like a really nice bonus connection if you want it. What you're going to have to balance here is you want the moon to stay in the third house. So you're kind of balancing this moon cusp situation. So if you utilize like a quadrant house system, which you ought to because they're the best, then you'll want to kind of figure out what your attitude or your approach to cusps are. I recommend kind of following the Ptolemaic method of 5 degrees before the cusp pulls that planet into into that house. So be mindful of that. Think about what that means for you and try to find this balance between keeping the moon in third house stuff to be able to have her house of joy, like to be able to be in it and to appreciate it and to use that, while also try to get the connection between the sun and the ascendant as strong as you want it. And that can be like just an optional thing, but something to consider, something to play around with. So the 23rd Lunar Mansion talisman in the Western European, North African area of the world is a little bit different in that in the North American version, the moon was far enough away to be past the square of Venus. So we've got Venus's square. Venus is at 18 degrees of Libra, so she casts a square down here to like 18 degrees of Capricorn, which the moon is applying to. But in the North American version, she was past that. She was like at 20 degrees Capricorn. So she was able to actually do a trine with the sun instead, which lined it up better. You can still do it with with the moon in a square aspect with Venus. I think that's very fine. Venus is a benefic planet. She wants to heal. She rules the first house in this chart, so she can still absolutely do that. Like Mars is too far away to worry about the square, yada yada. Venus can still pull that off, even though the square is less of a like ideal connection than like the trine is. But I would actually recommend doing something different with this chart entirely and using it as a Venus planetary talisman opportunity. Because at the same time while this is happening, it's Friday morning. Which is the day of Venus. So you end up with a situation where you have Venus in Libra on the ascendant during Venus's day, and with the moon immediately applying a trine to Venus. So while Venus is unafflicted, she's not retrograde. She's far enough away from that node where we don't have to worry about it. She's not square Mars or opposed by Mars. She's not afflicted by Saturn. She's away far enough for the sun to be visible. So this is checking all the boxes that we want. Maybe our moon phase or our moon connection can be slightly different, but squares are still going to get the job done. And so if you want to use this as a 23rd Lunar Mansion talisman, absolutely you can. But for Western Europe, North Africa, they actually have a really fun, a real fun allotment, we'll say, of configurations to actually make this a Venus and Libra talisman. That will be that will also be very functional. So finally, the 23rd Lunar Mansion opportunity for the Australian continent is going to be on September 13th at around 1945. And here, we've got the moon now on the midheaven in the 23rd mansion, and she's applying the square to Venus. So kind of in a similar situation with Western Europe, North Africa, where instead of that, we haven't quite gotten past that aspect with Venus to get to the trine to the sun like we had in North America, but the square to Venus is still very functional for what we want to do here. The ruler of the first house in this is going to be Mars down here in the third house. No affliction to a malefic planet, not combust the sun. The ascendant is also unafflicted by a malefic planet. And that's just what you want. That's what you want to watch out for. So I know you're probably asking, well, why does Australia not have a Venus planetary talisman opportunity? Is Western Europe, North Africa the only place that's going to get it? The answer to that is going to be yes. They're going to be the place that gets it. As you can see at this, even though we have the moon in an aspect with Venus on the descendant is not going to work. That's not what we want. We want Venus on the ascendant or on the midheaven. Though it is still Venus's day. And then if you kind of go back in time to get Venus in a position where we'd want her, like on the midheaven, I'm sorry. So if we get Venus on the midheaven, then we're actually going to have the moon apply to retrograde Saturn. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want Saturn retrograde. I don't want that in my Venus talisman. That doesn't seem very helpful. So maybe that's something that you want. Maybe you're fine with that. But I am not going to recommend it. At the same time, the ruler of the first house is this Saturn, which is retrograde, and I don't like that. So, unfortunately, it's just going to be Western Europe and North Africa for that one. Our next selection opportunity is going to be for the 24th Lunar Mansion. And so this is our little cluster here, the 23rd, 24th, 25th lunar mansion. So that's our cluster. So the 24th lunar mansion is one that I don't think we've heard from for a while. This one is more about increase, about multiplicity, about fertility, about addition, about adding more things. So there's a lot you can do with this talisman, and I really like it. It's similar to me. It's similar to me as the third lunar mansion, or even the seventh too. These talismans that have more flexible applications because they're vague. They're a little bit more vague, or more easily applicable to several different things. So the 24th lunar mansion is a lot like that, in that while it's about addition and multiplication and increase, it has the fertility angle. So there's always that kind of like conception and childbirth part of it that can be very useful for people who are in that phase of life. But other than that, the what even it's an increase button, it's an add button, but what you want to add is very up to you. So traditionally, the Beatrix tells us that we would, if we wanted to increase our cows, if we wanted more cows, we would we would use cow horn, like a cow's horn in the talisman creation. If we wanted to increase our sheep, we'd use a ram horn. And so that would be kind of the idea to work with here, I think, with this one, is to kind of that contagion magic, or that sympathetic magic of attach it to thing get bigger, thing get more, number go up. So if you wanted to use this like financially, you could use money. You could make like a dollar bill or whatever, the talisman, and then just kind of go from there of what it is that you might want. Maybe you are into collectibles of a certain kind. You want to find like more rarer collectibles of what you're after. Use the collectible as working the talisman. Like, just get creative or inventive with it, because we don't super have what else I'm going to call limits on this talisman that we do for some others. We've got this for North America. This is going to take place on September 14th at around noon. And this I kind of chose specifically. I talked before about getting the sun to sextile the ascendant, and that can be very, very helpful in specifically health kinds of talismans, just because the sun represents that vital force, that kind of like internal idealized health. The ascendant represents the body, so kind of bringing that connection to the ascendant can be very helpful. The sun can also help with like safety and things like that. So that connection with the sun is something that I look for or try to connect with more in health-based talismans. I wouldn't really expect that with the 24th mansion. It doesn't really have that kind of angle to it. But a benefic planet connecting to the ascendant is always helpful for stability. And I wanted to include that in this one specifically, because what we're working with here is kind of not great, in that in our election, we've got the moon in the 24th lunar mansion in the third house, and that's fine. But she's applying this trine to Jupiter, which is very far out. So we've got this like 15-ish degree orb between the planet and its aspect. So I would consider this a void moon. There's a whole host of reasons why I would do that. I have an article on my website that kind of breaks down the void moon and some of like the catastrophizing that happens around it. I'm old enough to remember when like astrologers were saying that Barack Obama's re-election campaign for the 2012 election was doomed because he made his presidential bid announcement during a void of course moon. So we'll find anything. We'll find anything to be afraid of. Don't worry. We'll find anything to be scared of. And so I don't have that similar viewpoint of the void of course moon, but what I do see happen with it is that it represents lag time. It represents kind of dead air where things don't really develop or things don't really happen. So ideally you would not have a long distance between the moon's next aspect and its completion. You would want that to kind of move along pretty quickly, because what I've seen a lot in talismanic elections and the results is that elections made with void moons take a while to come into effect. Like, there's a real delay in what it is that they're trying to do, because the moon doesn't have anywhere to go for a long time. But eventually that does happen. Eventually there is that sense of manifestation or coming together or completion, but it's just the time frame is much more distant than we had initially hoped. And we also see a similar thing when it comes to moon speed. The faster the moon is in the election, the faster the thing happens in most cases. And the opposite is also true. The slower the moon, the more time that we wait. So what we don't want is a slow moon plus a long distance between its next aspect. I don't think we have that here. Let's double check that. I think the moon is moving pretty well at this time. Yeah, she's fast. 14 and like a quarter degrees is pretty quick. So fast moon, long distance to get there. Like, that's fine. Middling result. So anyway, that long thing there, that long discretion, was really more to say manage your expectations, I guess, with it. And you could have a conversation about like, is it really even smart to recommend a talisman that's got a void moon in it because of the delay in it? I'm gonna go with yes for now because I'm doing it. In my opinion, this might change. Just because we have a delay and something doesn't mean that things aren't working. And sometimes you just need something. This is one of those things where I think about like sometimes you just need an election to get you through until you can find a better election later on. So I wouldn't consider this like a perfect, like put this in gold. This is immortalized this election. Definitely not worth it. But like first steps, baby steps into getting some like more meaningful change. Maybe next month we'll come back around to this election, to the 24th Lunar Mansion, and she'll have a much closer aspect that we can utilize. But for now, this is what we have. For Western Europe and North Africa, that 24th Lunar Mansion talisman is going to take place on September 14th at 22:15, so just after 10 o'clock. And kind of similar story. I think this is the only election that's got the moon in the 10th house. We've got the moon in the 10th house, and she is still applying that trine to Jupiter here. It's still far out because of the everything because of the world. The moon gets to be a little bit further along in Aquarius for the North American for the Western Europe North African version. In the North American version, she was 15 degrees distant, and here now she's 13 degrees distant. So we've really made up some speed. We really made up some room here, and that's great. So we still have this kind of long, drawn-out thing. Don't anticipate like miracle working for this. But the moon's not afflicted other than sort of this long distance that she has to travel. She's not being hurt by any sort of like malevolent or devious planet. The ascendant is also unafflicted here in Taurus, and that's going to point us to Venus down here in Libra. And I guess you could say like, oh, Venus is conjoined the part of fortune. So that's a little extra something, right? And yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. The Australian version kind of gets the opposite a little bit in that they've another one with the moon on the midheaven. Excellent. They've got the moon in the midheaven in the 24th mansion, and she's still applying that trine with Jupiter, but now it's 19 degrees apart. So Australia gets the longest out, like the furthest one out. They'll get Mars ruling the ascendant. Mars here in Cancer is not afflicted by another planet, just kind of dealing with being in fall and triplicity half the time. And so the 24th Lunar Mansion is one we haven't had in a long time, so when I saw we had an opportunity for it, I really wanted to kind of jump on it and share it. The moon's next aspect being very far out is going to kind of put a damper on things insofar as like how quickly it will be effective. It'll still do stuff, but hopefully there will be a better election for this coming up very soon that we can take advantage of for those who need a bit more immediate relief, we'll say, in whatever situation or thing it is that they're trying to accomplish. So our final election we're going to cover today is for the 25th Lunar Mansion. And this is a lunar... Oh, hold on. I've got a cat.
Come here. No, come here.
Aha, I have a cat. Yeah, she's going to help me explain the 25th Lunar Mansion. So the 25th Lunar Mansion is a lunar mansion that is very much more focused on agriculture, on the health of plants, on trees, things like that. And you can absolutely use it that way if you are a gardener, if you are, involved in farming, or if you just have like trees or plants, or like even herbalism. Yeah, if you grow your own herbs. 25th Lunar Mansion is really great for that. If you're not involved in those things, that's fine too. The 25th Lunar Mansion can still be very helpful. A lot of times I take these more agriculturally focused talismans and apply them a little bit more generally to like finances, just kind of like updating, we'll say, the mechanism behind what these talismans accomplish. In that today, not everybody, not a whole bunch of people make their living off of agriculture and like off the land like we used to way back when. But the connection there is like people would buy and sell. They would sell what they produce on their farms as a way to make money. Okay, girly, you're off the clock. So if you don't have sort of that gardening, that green thumb, that farming, that agricultural interest in the 25th Lunar Mansion, there's absolutely a way to use it. It can still be financial just because of that sort of historical connection between like money and plants and crops. So definitely look into that. This can be kind of another way to accomplish. So with that in mind, we've talked about how different kind of financial talismans operate differently, how they kind of accomplish the same goal differently. We see this also with health talismans, but this is actually kind of a fun opportunity to talk about different ones because we've had 3 different financial based talismans in this month. Australia had the 16th Lunar Mansion, which was more about buying and trading, selling, negotiating loans, things like that. Much more transactional, commercial, business oriented. I smacked my microphone. Then we had the 24th Lunar Mansion, which can be used for multiplying finances, for increasing income. And then now we have the 25th Lunar Mansion, which is about growth. So we say that it's about growth is because it has a lot, like a very big agricultural focus. So I think a good way to kind of divide these up and think about them is the 16th Lunar Mansion is about business, about trade, about making sales. The 24th Lunar Mansion is about improved income streams, maybe like raises, bonuses, things like that. And then the 25th Lunar Mansion is about growth and investment of what you already have. So all 3, I'm sure, make a not fun like trinity of financial responsibility and maneuvering. But individually, they can also be really helpful, especially if one is more specifically curated to kind of where you are, what aspect of your financial life you're looking to make more robust. So for the North American version, the 25th Lunar Mansion is going to take place on September 15th at about 12:28 p.m. And so here we're going to have the moon in the third house in this mansion, and she's going to be applying this trine here to Jupiter. It's a pretty close trine, so almost the exact opposite of what we had with the 24th mansion. So Jupiter, a really great planet, both for agriculture, both for crops, and also for money. For Jupiter is just all about like kind of growth and stability and creating an environment where growth is possible. So anytime we're looking at something that's a bit more like growth oriented or something that we want to make more of, Jupiter is a really great candidate to be that partner for the moon to help that talisman manifest. This one I wanted to give a little bit of an option just because I realized what I was doing with the time. So for what I have here, I've got it as late Scorpio rising, 29 degrees Scorpio, and that's going to point us to to Mars in Cancer in the 8th house. And the 8th house is a very financially focused house as well. And so this is an option, but you also can do an option with, if you want to do a little bit later, if you want to have like Sagittarius rising instead, that'll point you towards Jupiter. And I like both. I mean, I don't like that they're both kind of like essentially debilitated in signs I don't do well in. But I think both can be very, very useful, very helpful. And what I would say is if you're an individual who has like the second house, maybe like if you're like financially motivated, if you're wanting this to match kind of more your natal chart, if you're somebody who has the second house in either Sagittarius or in Gemini, the sign Jupiter's in the election, then use the Sagittarius ascendant. If your second house is in Cancer where Mars is, or in Scorpio where the ascendant or the election will be, then do that talisman instead. So just kind of like a simple little way you can kind of personalize the talisman a little bit more, and I like to do that especially when we have these times that land close to the transition of one ascendant to the next. The Western European and North African version of this chart is going to take place on September 15th at 13:04, so just after 1 o'clock. And it's going to be very similar to the North American version. Kind of like the same format, moon in the 3rd house, applying the trine to Jupiter, a good planet to represent growth for finances or for agriculture if that's where you want to use it. Mars is going to rule the 1st house from the 8th. At this point, you've got the sun connection, which I really like with the ascendant, so that's fun. And you could probably do the same thing with this one as you did the North American one. Push the time to get Sagittarius rising if you prefer that Jupiter to rule the ascendant. You might have to do more of a balance act between the moon and the 3rd house with that rising. But I also just really kind of very simply enjoy the sun aspect to the ascendant to kind of help stabilize it and make it better. Because what do you need to make plants grow? Sunlight. And so I would almost just kind of recommend this one overall, even if you wanted to. I guess what I'm going to say is I'm not going to tell you not to personalize it with the Jupiter, with the Sagittarius ascendant if you want to, but I think that the sun connection with the ascendant is a really great bonus to the Scorpio rising chart that I would probably just go with that. So the Australian version of this chart is going to be September 15th at around 10 p.m. This chart's set for like 21:53, so just a few minutes before. And here we're going to have the moon in the midheaven. She's going to be in that 25th mansion, and she's going to be applying that trine to Jupiter and Gemini still. Jupiter's in the second house in this chart, which I think is nice just for like that connection back to like the second house and money. The Venus is going to rule the ascendant here because Taurus is on the ascendant. Neither Taurus nor Venus are afflicted. The moon's not afflicted. Just another kind of, simple 25th Lunar Mansion talisman to work with. You kind of work with this because of how nice this all is. You get this really cute little air grand trine going on. But yeah, just another really good, another good financial aid, we'll say. Another good way to help improve finances. So I wanted to make a prediction at this point. I wanted to kind of transition a little bit and make a prediction. And my prediction is that you will see something like this chart in the near future. This chart is set for September 15th, and it's for kind of like that air grand trine that I mentioned before. I imagine that a lot of people are probably going to try to make this into a Venus and Libra talisman because for most places in the world, Venus will be rising. Venus will be close to the ascendant during Venus's hour, just like it's kind of pictured here, even though I know the hour is off screen from what you all are able to see. And you're going to have the moon in Aquarius, and it's like, wow, it's applying a trine to Venus. So we've got Venus angular in her sign of domicile while it's her day or hour, and the moon's applying to it. Like, that's great. And the reason why this is going to be a problem, I think, or whatever, is because, like, really at the time, the moon is applying to Jupiter here in Gemini. And this is something that not everybody agrees with me with, and I think that's fine. I think they're silly. They think I'm silly. We all just are silly here. But I've never really been able to get behind the idea of planetary talismans where the moon does not apply to that planet. It just seems very silly to me. And I think this is a good kind of representation or a good example of that, just because at the face of it, you look at it very quickly and you're like, oh, the moon's applying a trine to Venus and Libra. Excellent. But she's actually applying a trine to Jupiter in Gemini. And I think those two planets are like kind of hilariously different. You know what I mean? So if we're going to work with a Venus in Libra, if that's really the energy that we want, then we need to make sure that we're getting that as much as we can. And going from expecting or anticipating a talisman to be just like this dignified Venus, this very like luscious velveteen, dignified Venus in Libra, but the moon's actually applying to like a detriment Jupiter in Gemini. I just see that as a little bit, I don't know, just like catastrophic, I guess. just a little catastrophe as a treat. We'll say, because usually talismans that heavily incorporate planetary talismans, that heavily incorporate a planet in its detriment, suffers negative effects. Like that's a pretty good way to see that kind of suffer negative effects. This isn't so much of an issue when we see like fixed star, lunar mansions, Decan talismans. Well, we can't really see with Decan talismans, I guess, now that I think about it. But like lunar mansion and fixed star talismans, the sort of essential dignity of the planet that the moon's applying to isn't super important, because the understanding is that kind of the force comes from the star, the lunar mansion, and just that planet that the moon connects to kind of helps facilitate that. So we want similitude, but we don't necessarily care about efficaciousness. We don't really care about like how effective that planet is, because the planet's not really the one in the driver's seat. It's just more like reading the directions from the back seat, we'll say, of how in my car metaphor, in my extended driving planetary talisman metaphor. So that connection, that combination of identity and power is important for planetary talismans, because it's like if the idea is you want the moon to apply to a planet that can help out, well, what planet can help out in a Venus talisman? Venus. So you want a Venus connection, and then that power is going to come through because of the dignity that Venus is in. So I just want us to all be careful and just kind of be aware that if you see stuff for Venus in Libra coming up and it's this chart, just kind of like be aware in your head that the moon's actually applying a trine to Jupiter. Now, a small caveat is there will be some place in the world, and maybe we should find it just as a fun exercise, there will be some place in the world where where this chart will happen, but the moon will be like exactly between Jupiter and Venus. So there will be a point in time where the moon is gone past 20 degrees and 25 minutes of Aquarius and be applying to 20 degrees and 50 minutes. So we'll have that like 3/4 of a degree where the moon will be, separating from Jupiter and applying to Venus. And I think that would be an absolutely fabulous and absolutely wonderful Venus and Libra talisman. But that's all I wanted to talk about, and those are the elections that I had to share with you. 16th, 23rd, 24th, 25th talismans, Lunar Mansion talismans to work with. One sort of accidental Venus in Libra with the moon in Capricorn for Western Europe and North Africa to work with. And late summer, early fall is a great time for heliacal rises, so make sure to double check those if you're interested in working with fixed stars within your magical practice. And we'll see you guys again for our Libra eclipse. Yay!